Oh, okay. It's only me by myself. Let's fix that. Okay. One more screen. Boom. There we go. Hey. Hey. What's going on, everybody? Thank you for showing up. Let's see who we got in the chat right now. We got Major. We got Random2872. See you, David. Stephen Harris. Philip D. What's going on? Good afternoon, good morning, and then good evening for some of us. Right, Rich? It is. What time is it over there?
Oh, it's about 7:10 at night.
Oh, yeah. So, as you can tell, I am joined on this episode of Dungeoneers Pack Live by two gentlemen, joined by a friend, a long time. I've been trying to get Rich on the channel for a very, very long time, and we finally made it happen. Rich Mary, you may know him as another fellow D&D YouTube creator, and then also a member of his community, but also a designer in his own right. Matt, aka Krasiph, is joining me also, and today we're going to be talking about what makes a good subclass and what makes a bad subclass. But before we jump right into all that, we're going to be talking about a little bit of D&D news, but there isn't really too much. Some of the books are delayed, right? We got Fizzbands is finally dropping next week, but all the info's out. Some of our friends, and speaking of some of our friends, excuse me, Fry Minis, Eric, thank you for the $5 dono. Saying shout out to all these super cool dorks. Hit and like and subscribe. Thank you for supporting, brother. Always. And yeah, speaking of that, Eric got the book ahead of time. So if you want to check out everything for Fizzbands, Treasure of Dragons, go check out Fry Minis. He has a awesome playlist that'll pretty much keep you up to date before the book drops this Tuesday. And then what we have Strixhaven coming out in December instead of November. Oh, and we got another friend. We got Shrike here. What's going on, Shrike?
Yeah. Hey, how's it going?
All right. And then, yeah, that's it in terms of books. They announced the Critical Role book last week. The campaign book was it is Call of the Netherdeep, which is an actual campaign book that's going to be early. So we're getting 2 campaign books next month or next year. But obviously the big news this week, Critical Role Campaign 3 started. And no spoilers. But the 3 words you guys can look forward to is fresh cut grass. Make of it what you will. But yeah, that's it. Did you guys end up catching it?
I'm waiting for Monday when it comes up on YouTube, but I'm actually excited. And I'm surprised I've managed to avoid the spoilers being on Twitter so much as well.
Yeah, it's a very interesting start compared to campaign 2. I will say that it was fun. The energy's back. But yeah, it's very, very different. It has a very, very different feel. And there's, yeah, just keep in mind, fresh cut grass, and you won't be disappointed. All right. So before we jump into this, what makes a good and bad subclass, we're going to jump into what you guys think in question of the week. So question of the week, I asked you guys, what do you think makes a good and bad subclass? And you guys gave me tons of different answers. So I'm going to read a few of them. Called let's see, Robin Yeager. I think the others are saying flavor and mechanics. Good. What you look for in a good subclass, or makes a good subclass, is early level abilities are better than late ones. Power and how easily you can build around the subclass, and then flavor, but also allows players to change the flavor to better suit their character. Doesn't outshine other subclasses. And what's bad is late level abilities, weak abilities, locks players into a specific flavor that you have to build around. And okay, Eric, with another super chat. Oatmeal, apple pie, and blank. Yes, that's a little bit more spoilers, out of context spoilers for Critical Role Campaign 3. Just keep that in mind. Oatmeal, apple pie.
I have no idea. Okay. I'm just going to say I prefer bananas in my oatmeal, but I don't know.
Let's just say, Rich, when you see it, you'll see it.
When you know, you'll know.
Yeah, it's
okay.
It's very specific to something that happens, and it's, yeah, I'll just leave it at that. It's hilarious.
Well, we'll talk about it tomorrow then. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Philip D left a comment saying, I think that having all the coolest features come in at level 14 or higher kind of ruins it for me. I never played higher than level 14, so if the low level abilities aren't as useful, then it's not a great subclass for me. And I 100% agree. Front load those subclasses. Let's see, we got Tom. Focus on the first 5 to 6 levels when I'm developing a character, as the parties I've been tend to end at those levels. So either they die, or average campaign expectancy for 5th edition is up to levels 10 on average, 10, 11. So yeah, you're in the ballpark of staying within the first 5 to 6 levels. And let's see, we got Candy tools. Are looking for tools to make you feel more than just the average adventurer, but then the bad, lackluster kits are lacking power progression to match your experience gained. So this is more like a feeling of right. They're looking for something that makes them feel good and not having features that actually make you feel like you're playing your subclass. Makes it a bad subclass, and I'm more on that spectrum of narrative. The connection between narrative and mechanics. So let's see. We got Michael Colin. Something Treant Monk said, which I like, is a bad feature doesn't make a subclass worse. Meaning, if you have a good base class and give it a bad feature, it doesn't make it worse. Interesting. I'm not sure if these gentlemen will agree. I'm not sure. I agree completely. Just because on the narrative spectrum of how I feel that the mechanics should reinforce narrative, and having a bad subclass feature that doesn't actually, at least in my criteria, like doesn't actually help the narrative.
I think that when it comes to, sorry to jump in there, but when it comes to designing the subclass, you want each feature to be in theme with the subclass's story, but at the same time, the later levels are going to be more rarely used, but you've got to remember when someone's reading the subclass, they're reading all the abilities, and that's going to help flavor the actions.
Yeah, well, we'll get into that in a bit too. Oh yeah, go on, Matt.
Just to build off of that, I agree that front-loading a subclass, giving you some good, potent stuff early on, is arguably better. Like it gives you the most bang for your buck. You get to use that feature the longest. Having high-level aspirational power, I think, is a key feature of just the vibe of D&D. Right? Every wizard looks at wish. Every sorcerer or druid looks at shape change. Every paladin looks at those level 20 capstones and says, "One day I will be the biggest, baddest MFer on this initiative order." So like I feel like that's an important part of subclass design, is even if you never reach those level 20 features other than one shots, having them there to be a font of aspirational power and a font of end game story hooks. Make your villain a level 20 paladin. That bust out that imposition of conquest power that they get, where they're resistant to everything and they're just a train wreck of a baddie. That's a cool way to like use the subclass, even if it's not a player character. So I agree, front loading the class is better than not, but having those big keystone things at the end, it brings a lot of that D&D flavor to life.
I 100% agree. I admittedly I don't really look at the end. I don't put as much mechanical weight or too much emphasis or thought into like the last couple features, just because average play experience, you're not going past level 12. I think the highest I've actually played at was level 14, and then we either put most of my campaigns end at level 10, and most of the official printed adventures are going to end at level 10, between level 10 and level 14. I think outside of Horde of the Dragon Queen, that whole quest line, campaign line, there isn't really another level 20 campaign. So like you're front load everything. Before we really just dive into this, if you guys thank you for submitting all your questions or all your answers for question of the week. You can always look out for that on the community page and on the Discord on every Monday or Tuesday I post them. So yeah, it's youtube.com/DungeoneersPack, and then just go to click community, and then you can just go in and chime in. I'm going to be posting a little bit more polls on there too, but yeah, every Tuesday at least, you'll see a question of the week. So again, thank you guys for everybody. I didn't get to read through all of them, but this, looking at some of the other names, Eric Hall, thank you for submitting an answer. Brandon Pierce, Mijnor, and then always submitting Ignacio Vital. Thank you, buddy. All right, we got some questions. Let's answer some of these questions really quick. We'll start from the top. Let me see with the chat. Major said, "I feel the Artificer is undervalued, especially in its subclasses. How do you have any suggestions on how to change that?"
With the Artificer, I think it's all about customization. The whole point of the class is you're able to kind of go in a different direction. And because of this, the base class itself is not as powerful, but they make up for that by the subclasses being really powerful. So when you choose a subclass with the Artificer, it feels like it has more of an impact on the story than it would if you were choosing I don't know, a rogue subclass, for example.
I'm interested to know what major means by undervalued. I don't, because just from what I've played and what I've DM'd, artificers wreck. Like they ruin everything for me. Or for the DM that I'm running. I played an artificer artillerist, and that temp HP turret, it completely negated an encounter. There were multiple baddies that were all trying to pump us full of crossbow bolts, and it was like every round, here's another buffer of 7 temp HP that they can't get through because they can't roll higher than 9 damage. It just completely negated an encounter in one move. The armor and battlesmith, in my opinion, are some of the most overtuned subclasses because they make intelligence a super stat. You're no longer a mad class. You just get to crank your intelligence maximum high, go in and demolish.
Speaking of was it the armorer?
Mm-hmm.
Basically, your Iron Man. You have the two different modes,
Yeah.
but the stealth mode just doesn't ever get used. Most people go straight for the raw damage, which it's cool. It's very cool, but I feel like if it was balanced a little bit less, you would have more opportunities to use the duality of the two different options.
Yeah, and in terms of like, I think the armor artificer itself kind of points out some of the utility that mainly the artificer is. You create any magic item you want, and depending on your subclass will determine whether you're using it for yourself or for your party. And then you're the tools guy. So every tool in the game is at your disposal. So it does need a certain player to really think of creative ways to use it. And then also you have access to magic itself, which again is a very needs a creative player to really make certain spells that may not shine actually shine. I don't think the artificers are undervalued. I think the biggest thing that people overlook with the artificer or get frustrated with it, is just the magic crafting system. That's really, since there isn't an actual core mechanically craft system like in previous editions where you can break down items, take the resources and build something else, and you're kind of just like, here's a level, I pick 3 options, and that's it. There's a mechanical disconnect some people are having, but with the very simplistic, or not simplistic, but very streamlined approach of 5th edition's design, that's the closest you're going to get to actually just be like, I build this thing without actually having to roll anything to actually build it,
And I think one thing to speak in favor of the artificer in that line is that it does provide a pretty broad proficiency on all tools and also expertise in tools.
Yeah.
So if you're at a table that has implemented some kind of crafting system, it's ready to go.
Yeah.
You don't have to add on a new feature to the artificer to make it work with an existing crafting system. It's giving you the bonuses you need to be able to participate in that system really well.
I think that the streamlinedness, for want of a better expression, the ability to just craft different things is great because it takes out a lot of the crunch. If you have a video game that does all the mathematics in the background, then that's great. But if you're sitting at a table and everybody's wanting to take the turn, but you're waiting for the artificer to start crafting things, it kind of takes the wind out the sails, so to speak. But yeah. So still talking about the artificer, how do you pronounce it? Is it artificer or artificer? Because I've been arguing about this for months and months.
Aluminum,
yeah. What's it called? I just say artificer. I've heard it say.
I say artificer, yeah.
I've heard it say artificer a couple times here and there, but with a hard I, yeah.
Yeah. Tomato, whatever, however you play it, it's good.
All right. Let's see, question we got from Eric. This is a bit of a jokey one. He says, "How does someone replicate the super cool chill vibe of Rich? Asking for a friend."
We all wish we knew, man.
Yeah.
Just drink lots of water and exercise, and just don't get stressed. Let me put it this way. Before, in a long time ago, I used to be a chef. I used to work in restaurants, and that is one of the most high-pressure, stressful environments. You either crack under the pressure, or you just learn to go with the flow.
Or you achieve nirvana, as Rich has. A man of enlightenment.
All right. So one thing before we get into like what makes a good subclass, I think it always, for me, it's best to start off like pitfalls. What stuff do we try to avoid? Me, I super. I only consider myself a homebrewer, not an actual designer. I'm very novice. I've only actually put out one subclass finally. It took about a year, but I got it done, and I'm pretty sure it's not mechanically balanced or whatsoever have you. But for those looking to get into actual design and wanting to actually on either some sort of a professional level, whether it's amateur and eventually try to aspire to be paid, what are some pitfalls that are common that you guys kind of see in design or subclasses?
You want to start off?
Sure. I know one thing I see, and this. I'll start with just a piece of advice. If you want to get into designing stuff, um, for my pedigree, you won't see my name on like I don't have a ton of just individual subclasses released. I've released a class with a bunch of subclasses. I'm in the process of helping Rich with some subclasses, but I've done a lot of editing. I've done a lot of proofreading and sort of red penning of design of other people's subclasses. The one thing I see that is the most problematic is wanting to make a subclass that does everything. You want to change the way the class fundamentally operates, or you want to bring in features from other classes, and that's I'm all about niche preservation, and I think having some subclasses that allow a ranger to dip more into monk stuff or a monk dip into wizard stuff, like having that cross class coolness, that's also a good idea, but don't overdo it. Let the class be what it's supposed to be, and you're only tweaking it. You're staying within that lane. I see a lot of people that just try to like, I'm gonna make this entirely new mechanic that operates in a subclass. Maybe not.
Another point is that I've seen some people, and I'm not going to call anyone out, but they have the best of intentions. They want to make the best subclass in the world, but it's about 7 pages long, and it's full of stat blocks, and it's frustrating because I want them to make a great subclass, but at the same time, you need to try and edit yourself and realize that most people, when they pick up the thing, they're going to read a page, page and a half at the most, and then they're just going to get put off and go for a more simplified class. Unless you're in a very small niche of really min-maxy, grindy sort of character, then you've got to streamline it.
Brevity is the source of wit, and especially in 5e, people don't want crunch. Not that much crunch, right? They want like a good granola mix. They don't want hard pretzels.
Yeah, I
That's what
100% agree.
Pathfinder's for.
Yeah, like for me, the reason I like fifth edition, and it's just because everything it's just simpler and more straightforward to grasp. I can tell the story I want to tell and then reflavor anything I need to if I have to, without having to really dive into every little decision I need to make, where it ends up becoming a sense of paralysis. Like you don't really know what's gonna be, and then you end up playing the optimization game at that point. And for me, it's like I play and enjoy this game to tell a story. You know, hang out with my friends, and just kind of like try to tell a story with them. And then for me, when I look at a subclass, I want narrative. I want mechanics that give me narrative tools to facilitate that fantasy, whether they're powerful or not.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would rather something feel narratively cool than mechanically powerful.
Well, with regards to mechanics and narrative, I think before you even choose the class, when you're designing a subclass, the first thing you should do is find a cool idea. Find something that is going to be an interesting story, because a subclass, essentially, you're taking the class as the direction of where you want to take the character, but the subclass is going to it can be a big part of the story, or if you choose not to, it's just the mechanics to help add some flavor. But yeah, I think it's a lot of personalization can come, and how the story is structured can come from the subclass.
Building off of that, that's so key. Start with a cool narrative. Start with a cool design you want to design towards. Um, but also, this may be a hot take from me. Like, this may be just my opinion. Not every story fits every class. I think recently I was talking with my home group about designing subclasses for every class that had something to do with Draconic. You know, a dragon bard, a dragon cleric. What is the domain of dragon? Like, can you actually worship a dragon, or is that more like a warlock patron thing? And that's the pushback I give to that, is that like a dragon, we should look at that as a character. What are their motivations? What are their beliefs? What do they get? They are not like a religion. The notion of dragon is not a religion. The notion of, you know, peace or twilight or fire or light or life, those are domains. So think about how your narrative of what you're wanting to design fits with the narrative of the class. I think, Rich, I recently gave you some feedback on wizard stuff, where it's like, when you're designing a wizard subclass, it needs to be about, how are they nerding out about this? What is their research? How are they trying to study books and break magic in a way that feels very studious and academic?
Yeah, with regards to the wizard subclass, one of the problems I found was I was designing it. I had some cool ideas, and I think you get 4 chances with a wizard, 4 skills, but I had like 7 or 8 skills, and then I had to pair back and choose which ones meshed together the best. And I've still not got the last skill decided yet, because level 14, you want something big, beefy, and powerful, but everything I've came up with, it feels like a sorcerer, or it feels like a warlock. It doesn't feel like a wizard. And I know they're similar, but there are key differences in the narrative and the stories between these classes.
Yeah.
And I think that's the nature of spellcasters in general, because it's spellcasting is the best mechanic in the game. That lets you break action economy. It does everything. So when you're trying to pair your narrative to accommodate that, especially at the higher levels, there's definitely some bleed, especially if you're sharing the same theme or subclasses, because Draconic Sorcerer, it's very easy to pick up on the narrative for that. Your bloodline, your soul is tied to some sort of dragon, whether it's Bahamut, Tiamat, or everybody down below it. But a wizard, when you're thinking a narrative, what is a dragon, for example, what does that mean to the wizard who's about studying magic and mastering magic through study? That pretty much very much a scientist. Well, the artificer is an engineer, for example. You're gonna get that bleed, and I understand that issue. Which, like, you're gonna want to pull a little bit from the sorcerer because it's familiar, and but at the same time, it's because it's magic. Like, it's really what it comes down to. It's the Marvel problem they have with Doctor Strange and explaining how things work in their world. It's just magic. It's
magic.
It's magic.
Hand wave magic. As hands.
Okay.
I see Michael Carty. Sorry, I just wanted to, before we move on from starting at design, Michael Carty asked a good question of, would you suggest checking out some D&D Beyond subclasses for what not to do? That's my biggest piece of advice, is just read. Create a corpus of knowledge of all the subclasses and what you think about them. Because it's one thing to say, you read a subclass and you're like, oh, that sucks. Or you read a subclass and it's like, oh, that's OP. Think about why it's OP. Think about why it sucks. Really unpack that and dissolve it into its component parts and figure out where along this thought process did they go wrong, or where along this thought process did they go right.
Yeah, because I've seen like just different designs from everybody, from a bunch of different discords, and seeing stuff. You're gonna, the longer you play 5th edition, you're gonna get this sense of like something doesn't feel right about a class. Mm-hmm. Something doesn't grab you. Something doesn't connect with either the narrative or the mechanics. And then, like you said, if you're looking at classes on D&D Beyond or anybody else that puts out homebrews on Reddit, wherever, you're gonna read something and something's just not gonna look right, and then just being able to first identify that and then after that developing the skills to fix it on your way, and because that's part of the thing. Is I've noticed, going off on a little tangent, I've noticed that everybody has a different approach to design. They're never gonna agree on what is the right thing. Like, there's people that harp on WotC like wizards about how they design stuff, but it's not that they're right or wrong. It's just they're the ones that put the money for the book, so they're the standard people have to follow. But yeah, it's one of those things. Those are skills over time you'll learn. Don't feel afraid, especially I could, from personal experience, don't be afraid that you're not going to get it all right. But what you said, Matt, learn and read other people's stuff is the big key thing. Really develop that. Let's see, we got some questions from Eric and then from Classic Constructs. Let's see, we'll start with Eric. If you had to move a subclass's thematics from one class to another, which would you transfer? He said he'd love to see Sunsoul Barbarian.
Ooh. Oh, Sunsoul Barbarian's cool. I like that. Oh, if I had to move...
It's a good question. I do like the idea of taking... How would I put this? Taking the Battlemaster's abilities and transferring some of them into ways you could use for the monk to have more versatility in using the key, because you have Stunning Strike, you have Flurry of Blows, but outside of that, there's one or two small options, but generally speaking, they're the main two go-to. You're not going to have a good reason to use anything else. But if you can take the Battlemaster idea, transfer it to the monk, and say, okay, the monk now does a spinning German suplex or something crazy like that, it really adds some cinematic moments to the monk class, and it tries to bring people outside of just stun and strike every turn.
Yeah, I honestly, we can probably do a whole live on the monk. It's a point of contention. It's a point of contention. Go ahead.
Sorry. My buddy and I just had a big, because there was recently a Reddit post about like, here's how they should do monk in 5.5 or 6 or whatever it's going to be. And I was like, I agree with some of the thought here, because one of the notes that I always take about subclass design is there's always going to be a tension between enhancing the existing class underneath the subclass versus bringing brand new features and new mechanics to layer on top. There's a tension there, and I feel like monk is where that tension is really brought to the surface. There's a lot of, well, how much do we use key versus creating a brand new mechanic, and it's like, I think you see 4 Elements is an example of where that's bad.
Yeah.
Where the key costs are too expensive. They put on a new mechanic and it's using a resource that you're already heavily dependent on. There's not enough to go around. Versus Open Hand and Drunken Master are great because they take the key you already want to spend on Flurry of Blows and they make it better. They make it more efficient. So that's just a good subclass sort of notion to keep in the back of your head is, how am I enhancing the underlying class versus bringing new things to the table, and how cohesive is that? In terms of things that I'd like to see on another class, I love the Rune Knight fighter subclass. I like, take the damage boost out and stop complaining that it's OP. It's still a great subclass, and I would love I'm actually currently trying to write something like a Titan Mauler or a Titan Grip Barbarian that would be similar to that, where it's all about getting big and using bigger weapons than you normally would, like one-handing a two-handed weapon or something like that. How can you make that to where it's not mechanically busted and still narratively interesting is the tension that I'm working on right now.
Yeah, actually that brings up a good point, and that was my issue with the Rune Knight. I got some flack saying that I didn't like the Rune Knight when I put that video out, but for me it was a narrative issue. So you have the really cool idea of like using the enchanting ruins right into the mechanics and giving you giving you a bunch of utility features, and then you had the other narrative like I'm Apache Chief, Inu Chuck and just grow,
Yeah.
And for me, I know it's a very D&D lore thing, right? The runes and giants go hand in hand. But for me, I'm looking at the subclass. How do I apply it to other settings? And that's not always going to be the case. Some settings are not going to want that narrative of connecting the giant and the ruins. They just want the ruins, or they want the giant aspect. And I would like to see the giant aspect for the barbarian, and I would very much like to see the runes go to an artificer, because I think an artificer that kind of looks at ancient writing, ancient script, and using like either what's it? Forgot the chisel tool, mason's tools, and or some sort of calligrapher's tools. That are based around those two would be really, really interesting to put that flavor. Let's see. Anything on your end, Rich, you would want to see?
No, I think Battlemaster and Monk works quite well, but I'm trying to think of all the different. There's one key issue with the spellcasters is that they all share the same spell pool, and I think having a basic spell pool is great, but you want more personality for each class, so you want more Warlock only spells. You want some Sorcerer only spells. I kind of feel like the Sorcerer got the raw end of the deal with that.
Yeah.
I mean, you can think of 100 different Artificer specific spells, and they say in the book you can just reflavor the spell to be more mechanically based or cog based or whatever you want to call it. But yeah, the Artificer should get its own unique spells.
I will say my little pushback on that is that the Artificer's spells are unique in that you've got so much blending between what should be a wizard spell and what should be a cleric spell, right? I think the crossover between the lists is, at least that's the 5e version of that, is you don't need as many unique spells as if you can make spell identity closely attached at the hip to classes. For example, Call Lightning is 100% a druid spell. It feels like a druid spell.
Yeah.
People know it as a druid spell. But slap that thing on a Tempest Cleric, and now you've got some really good class flavor without having to create a brand new unique cleric. I can't remember if Tempest actually gets that spell. I'm just thinking off top of it. But like I know in my notes I have like for both known spellcasters and prepared spellcasters, one of the classic subclass things that you need to give those subclasses are expanded spell lists. Either spells that are always prepared, like with paladins, or spells that are added to your list for free, like with modern rangers and modern sorcerers. The early subclasses didn't have those, and that's why in my games I've always homebrewed spell lists for the Beastmaster, the Hunter, that kind of stuff. But being able to cross those boundaries where it's like, hey, this version of the Ranger gets Hex because it has a warlocky vibe to it, but it's still a Ranger at its heart. That's a cool way to add to the narrative without necessarily adding spells.
There's one thing that you brought up there, which I think is really important, is that the subclasses in the Player's Handbook were designed like 4 or 5 years before Tasha's Cauldron.
Oh yeah.
So the developers have had a lot more time to refine what works, what doesn't work. So if you take the Assassin Rogue, for example, great first level ability, level 3 ability, but after that, it's kind of you can spend a couple of hours forging papers. It's not really got the same impact as pretty much any other subclass.
It's funny you say that because I actually look at those features opposite, but I get where you're coming from. Because the thing for me is that the assassins are either all there or all gone. Did you get a surprise round? No, your subclass is gone.
Yep. Yeah, and I think that's one of the things I've seen pop up frequently with the assassin was that if you don't get that surprise off, you're pretty much just a rogue without any subclass flavor.
Yeah, and that's something to consider when you're designing. Honestly, any mechanic in 5e is how often it will be on. Is this a feature that just turns off and it can't be turned back on by any player choice? Is it entirely dependent on the DM? I mean, that is one honest bit of pushback to the ranger features of Natural Explorer and Favorite Enemy is that's on the DM. The DM has to give you a handle to be able to use those features, otherwise they basically don't exist.
100% agree. Especially Ranger's design in general it's super tied to the exploration pillar of the game, and that's why with Tasha's changes, it kind of moves it away from that.
I don't know if it moves away
I've
from
designed
it, but it makes it easier.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was just saying, I don't know if it moves away from it, but I think it makes it easier to use because you're not dependent on a specific environment.
Yeah, well, that's one problem I found when I was designing the Herbalist Ranger. I wanted to try and lean in on if the Ranger has an expertise in a certain area, a certain, what's the word I'm looking for, biome, then let's lean into that. They get different ways to modify the potions they're making, and that adds to the class. But the problem is with Tasha's, it's optional. You can go a totally different route. So that kind of invalidates a lot of the things I was designing. But if you still want to play the subclass, it still works perfectly fine mechanically. It's just when the book kind of pulls the rug from under you and it gives people other options, but also it kind of weakens the first options they gave people.
Okay.
Yeah, it's tough. Yeah.
All right, next question from Trevor, Classes and Constructs. I know it was abandoned for Strixhaven, but opinion of overlapping subclasses. It directly blends classes together, so I figure I would ask.
We actually just talked about this before we jumped on the stream.
We all talked about it right before we started the stream. There's a reason why those didn't work. Just coming in from, again, thinking from narrative and how it blends into the mechanics. Interesting. I think we all agreed we liked the idea of it mechanically, but narratively you kind of lose a little bit of the class identity for it, which with 5th edition's design, you bleed a little too much is like the best way I can put it. Like you don't feel as much as a warlock compared to the wizard. If like the Lorehold both get the warlock and the wizard get the same subclass, they're both doing the same thing. Like you don't get any difference. You're not going to feel more like a warlock. You're just going to feel like a very general, very generic you're just gonna have some warlock features, but you're really playing the same thing.
It's
I think
also. Oh, go ahead,
Go
Rich.
ahead. I was going to say, I think the idea behind those subclasses was because you get different classes and then you all choose the same subclass, you're all part of the same school. Narratively, it makes sense, but mechanically, it's just too messy and complicated. For example, if you just take, say there was a subclass that was a melee focused subclass, but you can give it to a warlock, a bard, a wizard, or a fighter. One of them is going to have a natural advantage over the other three. So you have to fine tune this to work in every aspect. It can't just work well with one class and then kind of work okay with the other.
Agreed.
Yeah.
And I think one of the one thing I mentioned before is that when you're designing a subclass, you always have to think about the tension between enhancing the class underneath it and providing new features. When you have a subclass that branches multiple classes, you literally cannot enhance the class underneath it. There's no way, at least not generically. So you have to provide additional features, and then you get into a problem of, well, a bard only gets 3 levels of subclass bonuses, whereas a wizard gets 4 or whatever. Like, the differing numbers then make it a problem where each feature has to be equally powerful for classes that are bringing different power levels to the table already in their base class. I love the idea. It felt a lot like how Pathfinder 2nd Edition did multi-classing with their class features, the class feat system. And I personally love that system. I think it's a great way of building characters, but it does not mesh with the current methodology of how 5e classes and subclasses are truly conjoined at the hip. I think if you iterated on it, it could work, but it'd be very, very difficult.
Yeah, and they didn't give themselves enough time. I think it was like maybe a 6-month turnaround time for
Yeah.
pretty much a mechanical system that would drastically change playstyles, drastically change how classes function. 6 months is not something that was going to give them enough time to actually fix it. So that's why when Strixhaven drops now in December, we're going to see a lot of those features change into, I believe, spells and feats. So it'll be interesting to see exactly what they did on that end.
Having
One
allegiance
last thing
to
I
a
would.
college. Oh.
I just wanted to say one last thing about that. I would rather they take some extra time and delay the books because once they're out, you can't go and rewrite it. It's not like a game where you can just add DLC, you can add a patch. And that's one of the other things. I'm feeling a bit fatigued with the amount of releases that Wizards have given us in the past year. So if there was another month gap between releases, that's not a problem.
No.
If anything, it would give people a chance to digest what they're releasing before they move on to the next thing.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, I agree with what Classes and Constructs said in chat, and what we've said. It works better. The allegiances to the different colleges work better as backgrounds or feats, similar to how I loved how Ravnica did the backgrounds, where
Yeah.
it was like, if you have spellcasting, here's some extra spells on your spell list. Like, that's cool because it's like, here's all the Izzet spells, here's all the Golgari spells. Perfect. I've got all the narrative flavor I need without having to like bolt on extra slapdash mechanics.
Yeah, and that's why I'm interested. It's interesting that they're going with the feat route because I thought they would just bring back that background route for them because or even do what Ebron did where they maybe do something like a group patron, and instead of having the group patrons, it's it's the college that you're going to, and like a bunch of players can be from that and just pick that up, or I think Ebron did sub races. I don't think it would work as well.
It did, yes.
But
my feeling, my gut feeling there is that they did it with feats because in the lore of Strixhaven, you're at college and that's where the action's taking place. That's where the camera's at. So your background is whatever led to you being at college.
Yeah.
Whereas now we're playing D&D Harry Potter.
Yeah.
So they wanted something that you could bolt on that wasn't erasing your past mechanics. It's giving you a new present tense mechanic. Something like Piety from Theros would be a good system for this. Something, I like the group patrons idea. I'm wondering if they thought, well, we put that in Tasha's. We don't know if every table's going to do this, whereas most D&D settings have some sort of magic college. So having some feats that align with magic college gives it the most play at the most tables.
100% agree. All right, I'm looking at the time. Let's get into what makes a good subclass. We know what not to do, right? Just pretty much the big thing is like avoid obviously front load your class, right? And then avoid too much flavor overlap, so you have a clear identity of what you're wanting to do narratively and mechanically. But what are the things that immediately stick out when you see a subclass that makes it good for you?
I've got one thing for me is when I'm looking at martial subclasses. One thing that spellcasters have an advantage on here, and it's not a mechanical advantage; it's a design advantage, is that there's baked in diversity to all the classes because there's spell choice. You know, very unlikely that two wizards or two sorcerers or two warlocks are going to be perfectly the same because they have enough choices to make in their base class that you don't have to have a lot of extra options in your subclasses to make those feel very different in playstyle. Whereas stuff like Fighter has the Battle Master, you've got all these maneuvers to pick from. Barbarian has the Totem Warrior, where you get to pick the different totems and what bonuses you get at each level. You've got the Storm Herald, where you get to pick the different types of storms. When you're designing a martial spell or a martial subclass, think about ways you can inject playstyle diversity into that subclass, so that you could even have two of the same subclass in the same group and they don't play the same, because all those martials are riding on top of very similar. Like every barbarian, take the subclass away, every barbarian plays exactly the same. Whereas you could take away a wizard subclass and two wizards would play completely differently because of the spell choices they picked. So that's something to be aware of when you're designing.
I think I always reiterate simplicity, streamline it. Just because the champion fighter has half a page of text describing it doesn't make it a bad subclass. It just means you don't have to think and get analysis paralysis on, oh, what should I do next? You know that you're going to try to be fishing for crits. You're going to be hitting as many things as possible. And that's fun. Outside of combat, the champion, it allows people to choose narratively what way they want to go with it. Because the champion is so generic, it is great at molding itself to your story, what you want to tell as a player. Not like you're not forced into telling one story as a player if you choose this subclass. So yeah, streamline it as much as you can. And if you look at classes in general, if there's a lot of different subclasses to choose from, then the more variety, the better. They don't always have to be top tier. They don't always have to be super powerful, as long as they're telling an interesting story and it gives your character more depth and diversity.
And Stephen Harris put in kind of doubling in on what we're saying about front load the theme of your class. Yeah, what we mean by exactly what we're all saying is front load the theme of your class, not necessarily the power. So when we're saying front load the class, it's like give us the features and the mechanics that help us immediately tell the story we want to tell. Um, and the power, eventually you're going to get a grasp of like what is a power level for the class if you kind of like compare and contrast what other subclasses for that class are doing. I would want to ask, when you guys are balancing or looking to balance a subclass for a specific class, are you guys balancing it up against other subclasses around the same round, or you guys just specifically look at balancing it against other classes within that class? So like quick example, I'm balancing I have a paladin subclass that I want to build, but I'm also balancing it. Do I balance it against other paladin subclasses only, or do I also look at it balancing it against fighters if they're playing a similar role or something?
Go ahead.
I think you have to do both, and I realize that sounds like a cop out answer, but I think you do have to do both because the nature of D&D is that we are all playing different versions of the same niches, right? Every adventuring party, like the game doesn't tell you that these things exist, but there's a face, there's a healer, there's a tank, there's a striker, there's these notions of archetypical builds. How exactly those archetypical builds come to fruition through your personal choices are different. But if a fighter and a paladin could perform the same role on the team, then you should design those things conscious of one another. I think the main thing you're looking for within the same class is consistency and expectations. If you're designing a paladin subclass, level 6 better give some sort of aura because they're all given an aura. Like that is, and if you're not giving an aura, you better have a really good reason why you're not. there's an old archetype in Pathfinder that's like the selfish paladin, the one that has seen too much happen when they led people into the fight, and so now their aura only applies to them and their benefits are more internal. That's an interesting build. It's telling an interesting story. If you're gonna defy the conventions of what a subclass should give for that class, have a strong narrative reason for it. But just familiarize yourself with what those subclasses are trying to do. If it's a rogue subclass, you're usually giving a different way to either use your cunning action and or create an opportunity to trigger sneak attack. If you're using a bard, you're usually giving a new way to use bardic inspiration. That's pretty much look at all of the subclasses. That's kind of what they're trying to do, be it cutting words, be it the Valor Bard's ability to use it on damage rolls instead. So yeah, it's both, but use other subclasses within that class to figure out the conventions, and then go to other classes to balance power. So if you're giving like the monk something that looks like a rogue ability, see where that rogue is, what level that rogue is getting that ability, and how powerful it is.
I think that you should look at all the subclasses, all the classes. You should look at the game as a whole and decide at the level you're at, will this balance well in a party? It's not just about the subclass, it's about everybody else that's playing as well. If your subclass is more of a offhand healer, then you don't have to be as powerful as a cleric, but knowing that you're only going to, I don't know, give 2d4 healing at level 8 is ridiculously low. You need to balance it within the game. But when it comes to the subclasses themselves, like you were saying, it's kind of each subclass in a class has generalized themes. For example, the sorcerer, and I don't know why I picked up on this, but 3 out of 5 of the subclasses have a flying ability or some way to fly. And that is something you need to be conscious of if you're designing a subclass.
Because it's cool to fly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And when you look at like sorcerers are like the cool guy at school version of the wizard, right? They're not getting straight A's, but everybody wants to sit at their table. So it feels very on brand to like, if you are going to be magic incarnate, you're gonna fly.
Honestly, that reminds me of a. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Not Another D&D podcast. Okay, they did like a little one shot or a little arc in their first campaign where they went to a wizard school, and that was one of the character arcs. It was a sorcerer that he just showed up and it was good. Just showed up to class. He didn't study. He didn't do anything. He partied all the time, and he just was like, "Yeah, I'm it. I'm the magic guy. Don't worry about it. I have it handled."
Yeah.
All right. So, what are some other things that you guys are looking for? Like, for example, when WotC brings out a subclass, either through UA or finally officially prints, what is it that you feel that makes them good?
The most exciting part when the UA comes out is if they're doing something different that you'd not thought of before, because it's very easy to take a spell and say, okay, this spell, I can tweak it and then make it an ability. But if they're saying, like the Echo Knight, for example, if you're able to make a second character, or like make an echo of yourself, sure, there's the blur spell, but developing that into a whole subclass for the fighter, that's amazing. It's great fun.
Echo Knight is a strong subclass, and it's not adding any damage, right? I mean, it's adding damage in that you can use an extra attack, but even that's a limited feature. It's something to be aware of in general in subclass design, and this might be a personal bias because of my playstyle. Versatility is its own power. People that harp on the Ranger being bad are undervaluing the power of versatility. The Ranger is good because I've played a Ranger. I've had Rangers in almost all of the campaigns that I've run. They are never irrelevant. There is always something they can do in everything, whether it's combat, role playing, or an exploration encounter. They're always relevant. It's one of the strengths of the Bard. The Bard is always relevant. It's one of the strengths of the Druid class spell list. There's a spell on there for everything. Oh, we're in a role playing encounter. I don't have charisma, but enhance ability. There you go, Bard. Go seduce someone. But another thing, I don't want to harp on the bad things, but it's always good to be aware of the bad things because you can use those to inform the good decisions. Don't put random good stuff into a class if it doesn't make a whole lot of narrative sense. A good example of this was when Aberrant Mind was released in Unearthed Arcana. It had an AC calculation of 13 plus dex, and it was like, you've got mucousy alien skin that brushes off. Here's an AC calculation. That's really what they said, right? But they took that out because it wasn't narratively compelling. It wasn't as interesting as all the other features they had going on. It was just generic good stuff.
I want to just chime in really quick. Thank you, Eric, for re-upping for the 3 months. Thank you. It popped up on the screen. I'll probably see it in the chat. All right, go ahead, Rich.
I've just totally lost my train of thought.
Sorry.
I'll be honest with you. It happens from time to time. But yeah, so do we have any more questions coming in, or is there anything you'd like to ask us?
What I'm thinking is, because Matt brought up about versatility, because I think that's a super undervalued aspect of design and what people value in classes, especially when they're doing optimization just on the building and playing side of it. They don't value versatility, and I think that's why a lot of subclasses. There's certain subclasses that I see that, like Knowledge Cleric, like they say I think it's a super versatile subclass that lets you play into the smarty pants, the nerdy side of stuff, kind of stepping a little bit on what the wizard's supposed to do. So my question is, in terms of what you're wanting to see, because obviously we're getting a bunch of, there's just going to be coming out with new subclasses. Are you guys looking for wanting to see more subclasses that focus on a specific role, or would you like to see more versatility in their design, like versatility in their roles?
It needs to be a mixture of both, because a good party composition has people specialize in what they're good at. And then if you have one person like a bard, which is generally good at everything, a little bit of healing, a little bit of melee, a little bit of spells, that's going to cover the weaknesses of the other players. But it feels good to be specializing in one aspect and saying, I'm the expert at fighting, I'm the face of the party, I'm going to sneak in and no one's going to see me. So yeah, you have different classes because you have different play styles, I think. And being a generalizer is a play style as well.
Absolutely. And I think I agree with Rich. I want to see both. I want to see something that, I want the bardiest bard, whatever that means. Or I want something that leans into the class's archetypical place in a party. But I also want stuff that's going to let them branch out. Think about if you had an Oath of Redemption paladin and a College of Swords bard. Now you've got the bard up in melee, and the Oath of Redemption paladin might be in the back doing more spellcastery buffing things. Like, you could switch those roles up just because you picked the subclasses that balance each other out nicely.
Yeah, because right now,
I think that's a lesson you learned from Darkest Dungeon, actually.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've played that game, but
yes,
it has different classes, and depending on your position in the party, you have different skills, and check it out if you haven't.
Yeah, I haven't played it yet, but I know its reviews are really high. It's very well revered, and actually I think they're coming out they just announced Darkest Dungeon 2. I'm seeing the ads all up on Epic Games and on Steam. So if you haven't played the first one, you can wait for the second one too. Okay, we got a question. Sir Quester, would it be good exercise to modify some existing subclasses to try and find ways to make a good one? Example, adding a spell list to Shadow Sorcerer.
I talked earlier on about how in my home games, Beastmaster and Hunter Rangers both get spell lists. I added spell lists to those subclasses because I think it's a really strong feature that they just missed out on because it was early in the design process. We didn't know that known spellcasters, and by the way, if you're designing a subclass, if it's a known spellcaster class, give it more spells. Just auto include that feature because there's really not a reason to. You're going to be missing out on a lot of power that every other subclass is going to have. But yeah, that's a great way to start practicing design, is iterating on existing designs that you think kind of missed the mark.
Yeah, actually, and even then, bringing that up, Baldur's Gate 3, they did the same thing for the Sorcerer. They just introduced it into the game, and they gave the Draconic Sorcerer extra spells.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, so, I agree. I've seen this. Shout out to Indestructible Boy, because I think he's doing a big overhaul for, what he would like to see in 5th edition. And he's going through every class and subclasses, fixing a bunch of stuff, and that's, the big thing that he's... If you're a fan of his channel or haven't seen his channel, definitely go check it out. He's another designer / content creator. And in his Discord, they're very much discussing about taking the features of existing subclasses and classes actually and changing them. It's a very, very good exercise.
Well, speaking of which, the best exercise you can do is make a subclass and then release it to everybody. If you go to a Discord and say, "This is my subclass, tell me what's wrong with it," as long as you're not too sensitive, they're going to pick every single fault. And this may be a little bit harsh, but it's the best way to figure out what your mistakes are. And you're not going to hit a home run in the first try, but if you try 3-4 times, you're going to come out with a better knowledge of how to design a class. A good example is if you have 100 years to paint one picture, or you have to paint 100 pictures in a year, the person that paints 100 pictures is going to get better, generally making skills.
100%. Yeah.
All right, I'm looking at the time. Okay, so it's been the hour. So it's the last thing. What is one thing that you guys hope that players that are wanting to jump from homebrew into design, what is the biggest takeaway for them when it approaches subclass design?
That's a good question. Don't be afraid to put your stuff out there. But I would say that there is a lot of competition out there. So if you're going to be successful, then you have to find a way to raise yourself head and shoulders above everybody else, because everybody has a subclass in their head. Not everybody has a good subclass. But if you're making 5, 6, 7 subclasses, you're going to have more of a chance of getting a
This is something that I think we lost
Okay,
audio on Rich.
Rich, are you there?
Oh no! Here, I'll fill space while he's doing technical difficulties. This is gonna be. Oh no!
Okay.
We found it.
It's worked.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, the last bit of your statement got cut off, Rich.
Don't be afraid. Go out and make mistakes. Fail upwards. That's my advice.
Yeah, definitely. The more you do, don't fear the man who's practiced 10,000 punches once. Fear the man who's practiced one punch 10,000 times. That whole thing. Like, just keep going, keep trying it. This is one thing that I'm very nitty gritty on, and too much to Rich's chagrin sometimes when I give him some feedback. Is study how, like, people can give Wizards of the Coast crap on a lot of stuff, and a lot of it's rightly earned. Study how they write things. There's a way to phrase mechanics in D&D 5e that makes it more readable, makes it more understandable. Think about, you know how this feature should work. Is someone reading it for the first time going to understand how that feature works? Because if your subclass, or really anything you design, if the mechanics and the intent aren't immediately jumping off the page and informing me how to play it and why it's cool, it's not going to land. People are going to be like, I'm not going to get into a rules lawyer debate every time I try and use this feature. They're going to throw it away. So think about how you phrase things. Really be aware of the patterns of phrasing and word use, because that's just going to pay dividends in your design work overall. It's going to make things a lot easier to churn out. And it's also, this is maybe just me because it's how my brain works, but if you notice the patterns of design that are used everywhere, it gives you a little hint as to, like, okay, where aren't we touching? What are the areas of design that haven't been touched? And once you figure that out, you can really start diving in and making some cool stuff that people haven't seen.
You can see the matrix.
You can see them.
Yeah.
If you could see, yeah, I don't see class features anymore. I just see blonde, brunette, redhead.
Yeah. For me, my big advice, it's kind of doubling down on both of your guys, is don't be afraid to try. Just do it. You're not going to be able to do anything if you don't actually do it, and that's with anything in life. If you don't go out and actually just try, you're gonna make mistakes. It happens, but that's the only way you're gonna learn. But if you just consistently, like, just don't go out and try, you're never gonna get anything accomplished. So go out,
Well, that's good life advice, actually.
Yeah.
If you're making a YouTube channel, your first one's going to be horrible. Second video is going to be a little bit better. Third one's going to be better. And before you know it, you'll be fantastic.
Yeah, and
don't let your dreams be dreams.
Yeah, exactly that, and that's the big thing. And the other thing is, people are going to be rough. They're gonna bash they themselves. People struggle to communicate at times. But normally they're mostly well intentioned. don't always take it to heart. If you really want to improve, there's always a little bit of help with what they're critiquing you on. So yeah, maybe step back if it did hit a little hard, but then really look at what they're trying to say and then move on from there. Just always try to improve. All right, it is 12:06. Honestly, thank you guys. This has been a really great hour. The hour flew by really, really quick. I would love to have you guys both on again. Uh, as always, Rich, where can they find you?
Well, you can find me Rich Merry on YouTube, Rich Merry 0 on Twitter because someone else took the handle already. I'm on Patreon. I've got like 6 subclasses up there. We're going to have 12 of them out by the end of Christmas. And yeah, I have a website as well, which is still in development, but I've got a landing page. It's just richmerry.com. So I think that's everything. Oh, Ko-fi as well. I've got individual subclasses up there on the Ko-fi. All the links are down below. And if you have any questions, don't be afraid to ask me on Twitter or check out the Discord as well.
Yep. And Matt, where can they find you?
I am at Krasiph, Krasiph on Twitter for my personal stuff. I also am a lead writer and designer for Day 20, which is a new sort of publishing house that we're trying to produce timeless modular content for D&D 5e. You can find that stuff at day20_game on Twitter and Instagram. And you can also find us at www.day20.info. We've been publishing adventures. We just came out with one of our biggest adventures yet, Court of Seasons, that is modular designed. It can be played at any level. It scales automatically. And you can also find the Inquisitor class along with 5 cool subclasses for it.
And actually, Rich, you did do a video on the Inquisitor, so definitely go check it out. It's a preview of the class. It's on Rich's channel. Again, thank you guys for joining me. This was a lot of fun. I want to have you guys back on again to talk either more design or just anything D&D really. You can find out all the stuff. All the links are in the description below. As always, go support everybody that'll bring on this on the stream. They do a lot of great work. You guys are really fun guys. Join Rich's Discord. I'm in there. Crafts is in there. Obviously, Rich is in there. And we're always talking about something. I think lately we've been talking a lot about design and kind of lately.
That's the main topic.
That's the main topic. Yeah. So again, thank you guys. Always. This week I dropped the Fizzband video regarding the Dragonborn new subrace variant. So if you haven't checked it out, check it out on the channel. As always, follow me on Facebook. It's Dungeoneers Pack YT on Facebook, DPack YT on Twitter, because just like Rich, somebody took Dungeoneers Pack on Twitter. And then on Instagram, though, it's just Dungeoneers Pack. And best way to support my channel, Rich's channel, is like, comment, subscribe on every video. It really helps kick all of our stuff into the algorithm, letting people know and see that you guys like our stuff. So definitely go do that. And also, what is coming up next week? Bizbands is out. Monk video is coming out, so expect to see that. And also, I believe Eric might still be in here. He is going to be doing an interview with Shrike. Both Rich and I were on Shrike's show. I believe it starts in an hour. So if you guys get a chance, definitely go check out Shrike's channel. Fry Minis will be interviewed. You can also go back and check the VODs and see Rich and I also being interviewed about our DMing history. So again, thank you guys for joining me. I want to have you guys back on again when we can align times.
Oh, that'd be great.
This is fun. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. And I'm seeing everybody in the chat again. Thank you, Philip D. Thank you, David, Eric, for stopping by, Sir Quester, everybody else that dropped questions. And until next time, you guys have a good one. Take care.
Free the Bandahob. Bye.
Bye.